We are back with another tier list video, but this one is going to be covering artillery officers. I have recently put out an updated tank-specific officer tier list video. I am working on getting all my tier list videos updated, as it's been a little while since I've done a actual tier list video. And of course, we've had quite a few officers get added to Warpath since then. So I started with tank officers, and now we are transitioning to the artillery officers. So without further ado, let's go and get started. Welcome back, guys. I hope you are all doing well. I hope life is going wonderful for each and every one of you. I'm super excited to cover this brand new artillery officer tier list, just to update you guys on the rankings and where I see certain things stand. We have, for full transparency, in the 10.4 update, we have just had a brand new artillery officer added to the game. He has not yet been uploaded to the tier list. But before we jump into the tier list maker, if you guys enjoy these tier list videos and want to continue to see more of them roll out in the future, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel if you are not already, so you don't miss any future videos. Let's try to get this video to at least 150 likes. Now let's go ahead and jump into the tier list. All right, we are in the tier list maker now, and here is how it is going to be broke down. So we have got an S tier, A tier, B tier, C tier, and D tier. Now, S tier is going to be your top of the line, your absolute must-haves. Your A tier are going to be really high-end, good quality lead officers, not quite at that game-changing level per se like the S tier officers, but still really, really high-end priority officers. B tier are going to be decent, average lead officers, good secondary or complementary officers, depending on your setup. With artillery, some players run, typically most players, unless they've got just a really, really niche or unique setup, most players run 2, sometimes 3 artillery units, and it's not out of the question for some players to even run 4, depending on if they throw a rocket launcher or an anti-tank gun in there. So depending on your number of artillery units, that B tier of officers can play that good lead officer, good support role officer if you've got an excess of artillery units. C tier are going to be very average, like bottom of the average category. Decent enough support role officers, maybe even have a skill or 2 that can be used for the skill training system, so they have just a slight bit of value there. And then D is going to be the absolute, just don't completely avoid them officers. Now, underneath that, you're going to see 3 different categories. We have got artillery officers, in parentheses I put free to play, artillery officers, in parentheses, that is short for the exclusive lounge. And then underneath that are others, which those officers are not deemed artillery-specific officers, but depending on the stage of the game you were in and the unit setup that you are running, you can plug these officers in with artillery units and still get some value out of them. So what we're going to do is pretty much go through it the same way as I did with my brand new tank officer tier list video. We're going to go through the free-to-play officers first. These are going to be the officers that are fully accessible to everybody. The artillery or the exclusive lounge artillery officers are, yes, accessible to everybody, but they take a very, very long time to get if you do not invest heavily into the exclusive lounge. So those are going to go after that, and then we will follow it up and end with the other officers. All right, starting from the top is the almighty famous Antonina Shevchenko. She is a Generation 1 officer that has obviously survived the test of time. She is, at least as of right now, one of only 2 officers, artillery-specific officers, that are going to offer you an extra grid of firing range when fully awakened, the other being Lady Liberty. However, Lady Liberty is obviously an exclusive lounge officer, so she is not really a viable option for most players. So for that reason, she is quite literally, especially in the open field with an artillery unit, game-changing, easy S-tier officer. Next up is going to be Eruptor, again, Generation 1 officer. He is very much geared towards attacking bases / fortifications. So generally speaking, when we say bases and fortifications, we're talking about, obviously, bases. And then when they're talking about fortifications, generally they mean think like infantry units in bunker mode. That's going to be considered a fortification. So having Eruptor somewhere plugged in, if you obviously are attacking bases, sending artillery units out to army groups that are going to be attacking bases, he's got a viable role there. If you are in more of a defensive or a base defensive situation, you know, he can maybe plug in if you have a multitude of artillery units. He can serve a role against infantry, but with the addition of a bunch of new officers, he's kind of lost a little bit of relevance. He also still does offer some really high-end skills through the officer skill that you can use through the officer skill training system. So for that reason, he is going to be a B tier officer for me. Berserker Bear is another officer that has been around for a while in Warpath, and on paper, he does okay. He's definitely got some value through the skill training system, but other than that, he has really no value at all. I've done some pretty extensive testing. Obviously, it's been a very, very long time now, and I know a lot of other players have done some testing with him in the past as well, and he is just not very good at all. His special skill, which you can rob for the officer skill training system, which every time whatever troop he is on or that skill is on, every time that unit kills another unit, it has a chance, I believe it's 30%, it has a 30% chance to reduce the prep time of those officers by 1 second. So there's definitely some value there, but outside of that specific skill, there's pretty much no value at the present moment for Berserker Bear. He would be a D tier officer, but because he does have that one valuable skill there through the officer skill training system, he's going to push his way into the C category. Up next is going to be our man Argent Flame. He's been around for a little while. Everybody knows him. He is a monster, especially when it comes to base defense. He's going to offer a ton of garrison damage. He's also going to boost the aid officer that he is with, the officer skill damage that they are going to put out. So for that reason alone, because of how much he juices up his aid officer on top of how strong he is just as a standalone officer, he is definitely going to be an S tier. Now, Eye of Providence is slowly becoming an interesting one because in my past artillery specific officer tier list videos, he would be an S tier officer, and I'm still going to put him into that category today. Spoiler alert. However, he is slowly starting to lose a little steam, and the reason I say that is because he is an absolute cheat code when it comes to attacking bases. However, bases in Warpath are getting just so unbelievably strong that there's really not a lot of base-to-base play styles anymore, except for if you're a big whale and you're attacking obviously weaker players. Those guys would benefit. Obviously, there's going to be a benefit and some value there when you're sending artillery units out to army groups. You would definitely want to have him, if at all possible, on your artillery unit, so that way you can get through and kill the enemy bases at a faster rate. But he's also very niche. He is not a high-end field fighting artillery officer. He is geared for one thing and one thing only, and that is attacking bases, which gives him that edge and makes him an S tier officer because he can make a massive, massive difference in battle. But with the addition of some new artillery officers, the new one we have just added with the 10.4 update that is also geared towards attacking bases and fortifications, I could see it being possible that Eye of Providence gets pushed down into an A tier officer at some point in the future. When, I don't know, and maybe I'm wrong, but if they keep adding officers like that into the game, Eye of Providence may lose a little bit of steam. But overall, I digress. He is still a monster in his specific role. The next officer we have is Maestro. I'm butchering the crap out of the name like I generally always do. Again, he's been around for a little bit of time. He is not really widely used. He was originally kind of viewed as more of an anti-tank gun officer because he has some extra penetration damage, things like that, but he's still just not being widely adopted. But he does have some good value if you've got, think 3 or 4 artillery units going on, and I've seen people run a couple of artillery units, a couple of anti-tank guns. So depending on your unit setup, he's definitely got some value. But as a standalone officer, he's not really at the top of the list by any means, but he's not bad either. I'm going to put him into it. He's a pretty, I don't want to say controversial. I'm going to give him an A rating because he is a good officer. He really is. He really is a good officer. He's just not quite good enough to find his way into most lineups, which again is it's a little surprising because he does host a pretty decent set of skills. But again, I digress with him as well. We're locking him in at the A category. If you disagree with me, I would genuinely love, because of how kind of odd of an officer he is. I would love to hear why you think he should be either higher or lower, and tell me why. The next officer in our free-to-play list here is going to be Stinger Fist, and I'm not going to go into too much of an explanation. He's obviously an easy S-tier officer. He's going to offer you offensive capabilities with a massive damage coefficient, or baseline damage coefficient of 1800 when maxed. He's also going to offer some crazy garrison damage. He's also going to offer you some actual benefit to your base directly. So he is easy, hands down, S tier. Now transitioning to our exclusive lounge artillery officers. The first officer on the list is going to be Saber of the Nation. Now he is the first exclusive lounge officer, if you are a new player, that you are actually going to have access to. Now he is a very good officer. Comparatively speaking to the other exclusive lounge officers that have been added to the game since Saber of the Nation was originally added, and since the exclusive lounge in general was added to the game, he is definitely not one of the best exclusive lounge officers. But the one thing that he does do extremely, extremely well is he has the ability to, or he has a percentage of a chance to fire off his tactical skill at any given time. His Awakened skill gives him a 30% chance to fire off his tactical skill at any given time, and when that thing fires, it hits freaking hard. So he does a lot of good, and he brings a lot of value to an artillery officer, especially in the open field. But of course, as we know, if you are field fighting with artillery units, you pretty much have to have a 5-grid officer, which then limits you to basically 2 options, which is going to be Antonina Shevchenko and Lady Liberty right now. So you're going to have to pair him with one of those 2. And one of them is also a fellow exclusive lounge officer, so your hands are a little bit tied there. You kind of have to make a choice. So with that in mind, and with the value he still brings, but being on the bottom end of exclusive lounge officers, he is going to be an A-tier officer from me. Up next is going to be Lady Liberty. Once again, exclusive lounge officer, and like I've already said earlier in the video, she is the only other officer besides Antonina Shevchenko that are going to offer you an extra grid of firing range. She also offers a whole bunch of additional value, one of them being she has a massive damage coefficient. She can also reduce the load time of whatever artillery unit she is on. So hands down, easy S-tier officer. Next up is going to be Red Heat, and if you want to talk about an artillery officer that flat dishes out damage, Red Heat is the one. Easy, hands down, S tier. She is an absolute damage monster when it comes to your artillery officers. She pairs well with just about any officer you want to put her on. She does well garrisoned in your base. She does well in the open field. Field fighting, there's nothing she doesn't do well on or with in regard to an artillery unit. Now, transitioning to the others category, this is going to be, like I said, some more versatile officers that can play an artillery role, whether it be for a short period of time or a long period of time, Percy being one of those that is a short period of time. Now, early in the game, you can put her on a tank. She's going to be the earliest and fastest officer you are going to awaken. It is very easy now to fully awaken Percy. So she is, for that reason, going to offer you some value early in the game. She's great on tanks. She's great on artillery. But that is going to wane very quickly. After about day 75, when you start to unlock additional officers, she's going to the wayside in a hurry. You can, of course, still use some of her skills for the officer skill training system. So she holds a little bit of relevancy there, which is why she's going to get the nod as a C tier. And then my man War Machine. You guys, I rave about him all the time. He is a monster. Again, early game officer, but one of the few first-generation officers that holds or withstands the test of time. He is definitely a versatile officer. He can go well on anything, but he does have a lot of value when paired. I've seen him get paired with, and I've personally paired him with and got some value out of him on the likes of the rocket launcher, mainly for his load time reduction, because the rocket launcher obviously has a little bit longer of a load time. So he does well there. He also does pretty well on the anti-tank gun. So he's going to get the nod as an A tier. And then we have got Golden Eagle. Golden Eagle, again, is a newer officer in Warpath, also a versatile officer, kind of hand in hand with War Machine, the easy 2 most versatile officers in Warpath, just generally speaking. He does, again, extremely well on pretty much anything you put him on, but in regard to artillery-specific units, he does one thing really well, and that is he pairs with the anti-tank gun with his increased penetration. So that's where his value is going to be at. So overall, he is an S tier officer in my personal opinion, just generally and broadly speaking about Warpath. But in regard to artillery specific roles, he is going to be an A tier officer because he doesn't and won't offer you really any value on like a Liberty or a Martyr howitzer, but he will offer you a lot of value on the anti-tank gun, and he also has some benefit to your base. So that's going to wrap us up for the artillery officer tier list. Now, the one thing that I want to take note of and make sure that we discuss here briefly at the end is the fact that there are no D tier artillery officers, at least not yet in Warpath. And that is because, at least as of right now, and I don't really see this changing in the foreseeable future, but the way it stands right now, every single one of these officers that are either artillery-specific officers or that can be used in an artillery officer role, they've all got value. You can't find just a truly like bad artillery officer, and that's good. That means that we've got some versatility going on. That means we've got options. That also adds a level of strategy to the game, as especially a new player with so many options, you've got to really be strategic about which officers that you invest in and which you don't, and that's going to largely come down to your play style and the units that you are prioritizing. I hope you guys enjoyed the artillery officer tier list video. Give me your thoughts, give me your feedback in the comments below. I would love to hear what you guys have to say. If you have stuck around and made it this far into the video, if you've got access to Discord and are not already in our community Discord server, the link to that is going to be in the description of the video below. Click on that link, it'll take you right into the community Discord server. Whether you are a new player and want to learn some more, whether you have questions, it doesn't matter. If you're a veteran player and you want to just come hang out, get to know more people in the community, same thing. Doesn't matter. Absolutely everybody is welcome. As always, thanks for taking the time to watch the video, and we'll see you on the next one.